Hello and welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today will be part 6 in our discussion of the 7 blunders of Freemasonry and overcoming them, with our discussion of frugality without discretion.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we will be discussing overcoming frugality without discretion as one of the 7 blunders of Freemasonry. And we have our usual crew from the last few days here all together again. Very worshipful Brother David Colbeth, and myself, Matthew Appel, from down here in the Grand Lodge of Washington. Worshipful Brother Stephen Chung from in Kelowna, British Columbia. And Right Worshipful Brother Trevor McEwen, who is the Grand Historian of the Grand Lodge of British Columbia in the Yukon. And our recurring guest, Most Worshipful Brother Jim Mendoza, the past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Washington. Thank you for coming out again, Most Worshipful Brother Jim.
My pleasure.
It's always great to have you here. It's always a good discussion.
Thank you.
So we were just saying right before we started recording here, or hopefully before we started recording, that this topic was essentially frugality without discretion is being cheap for being cheap's sake. And how that can harm the spirit of the lodge. I guess how do we feel that is, and how can we fight it?
Well, you've probably heard me say this on multiple occasions, not just in the original presentation, but in my travels throughout the jurisdiction, that I think that some brethren take the term Freemasonry or Freemason a bit too literally. I liken it to, when you have a discussion about an event, the first thing that anybody always wants to ask is, well, how can we do this on the cheap? Now, they may not say that directly, but they're looking for ways to do this on the cheap. One of my personal favorites that I talk about a lot is a Sweethearts event that a lodge was hosting. And the worship master was talking about the fact, and this is so great, the ladies will be preparing the meal. And I just stopped, literally stopped. And I looked at everybody. I'm going, surely somebody's going to say something. This is not right. There was another one that was kind of similar to that. A lodge had a great guest speaker. Fantastic speaker, right? And somebody in the lodge said, I would propose that we buy our guests, and I keep in mind, this is a Seattle-based lodge. So Matt, I'm not looking at you or your lodge, but I want to point, it's a Seattle-based lodge. You're from Seattle, okay? And the Seattle-based lodge put a motion forward that they should buy the speaker and his wife a nice dinner. And he moved for $25. I don't know where you can find a nice dinner in Seattle for $25.
You can go to Dick's.
You could get Dick's Hamburgers. That's a lovely place. Lovely place to take to. This is a high-end speaker who, the whole bit. Yeah, it was just, so there are all kinds of examples of that, all of that out there. And it's like, now keep in mind, I use these examples and I don't want to belittle anyone, but I do want to point something out here. When you come to spending your lodge's money from the lowest common denominator, let's say, what's going to happen is, guess what? That's a drop in quality, right? And I mentioned earlier, we talked about quality over quantity. Part of quality is making sure that you have first-class events that are going to attract not only people outside your lodge, but guess what? People inside your lodge. That's the thing there, because who wants to come? Let's be honest. Whose wife is going to want to come to a sweetheart dinner where they have to prepare the meal? I got news for you. My wife ain't going. And my wife is, and as any grandmaster will tell you, their lady sometimes is long suffering in what they're willing to put up with because of some the way some lodges say, well, we have to do this the cheapest possible way. I mentioned in the original presentation how my lodge, Frank S. Lamb 313, does an annual crab feed, and it's not a cheap event to put together. When you consider everything that we do, all the things we have to secure to make it happen, but we make it happen every year. We don't freak out about the cost. We know how much money we're going to make. And we always look for ways to make $1 more the following year. How can we improve the event? And it's become a signature event over the year. I mean, my lodge has less than 100 members, and yet we're able to bring in 400 people to a crab feed. And it's not a cheap event. I mean, we use what I will call the Puyallup Fair model of revenue. For those of you who don't know, the Puyallup Fair is a state fair here in Washington, and just like any state fair, you pay to park, you pay your admission ticket, and then everything else begins. Right? You got to buy the food, you got to buy the rides, you got to buy the souvenirs, all that good stuff, right? And sometimes you're buying stuff on the way out the door. We kind of use a similar model with the crab feed. We're looking for ways to increase revenue where we make it fun and people do it, and we raise a lot of money. And as a result, we're able to turn around and give a lot of money to charity. But also, here's the other cool thing. People want to attend the event. You don't have a 400 person event that people feel quote unquote obligated to go to. They want to come to this event. And it's a fun and it's a fun event to attend. The other comment I always talk about with Frugality Without Discretion is our buildings. I said in the previous in the base presentation, your building screams Freemasonry 24/7. So what is it saying about your lodge? What is it saying about the fraternity? I remember sitting in a lodge and they were railing about everything they had to do to bring the building up to spec, right? And they asked for my opinion. I said, all right, you're not going to like it, but I'll put it to you this way. Many of you here are homeowners. How much of this deferred maintenance would you allow on your house? Guess what? No more complaints. No more complaints, because now I put it back on them. Yeah.
It's interesting though how there will be members that have no problem spending the money to go to that crab feast, or we have a lobster fest in our jurisdiction, and they have no problem spending the money to go to that. But everything else they want done as cheap as possible. Our dues, that's always a common discussion around when we're going to set our dues and our budget, and it's I don't know how we get past it, but it is a constant battle with those who don't want to spend the money to have a quality events versus those who just want to get by, right? And it is starting to get to a frustrating point because it's going to stalemate us eventually.
I think the best thing that any lodge can do is write a budget. I know people freak out. Oh God, why do I have to write a budget? Yeah, write a budget. Income, expenses, net.
Yep.
And and sometimes people just need to see in black and white. We bring in this much money in revenue. We have this much expenses. This is our net. So if it's a negative, what do you cut?
Right. And we do that. We do a budget every year and our budget sets our dues. And so, but when that budget's presented, man, do they pick it apart, and do they ever cut this out, cut that out? It's like, well, now we're not doing things again, right? And we're reducing our lodge experience. And so, it's that's the battle we fight.
Yeah, I know, and I get that, I understand that, but there's an old line: what costs masonry? Not too long ago, I went to a district meeting, and our deputy grand master, our current deputy grand master, I think he was senior grand war at the time, raised up a tin of tobacco and talked about how much money he spends on chewing tobacco. Talked about the Grand Master and how much money he spends on Starbucks coffee. Talked about the Deputy Grand Master at the time, and he talked about how much money he has in his liquor cabinet on Scotch. Okay, and then he turned it back around. If we're willing to spend money on our bad habits, why can't we spend money on a good habit? Why do we throw up these barricades of spending money on a good habit like Freemasonry or a good cause like Freemasonry?
Very well said.
And it was really thought provoking as he's holding up and the whole time he's holding up his tobacco tin, the whole time. And I don't indulge in that, but I know it's not cheap, especially down in this state, because there's a tobacco tax down here. So it's that whole thing. But I think brethren just need to see that masonry isn't free. It was never meant to be free. Okay. And in my viewpoint, dues should, if dues are your principal fundraiser, because for some lodges they are, then they need to reflect what you as a lodge are going to do. Some lodges have gotten creative, like Verity Lodge and Daylight Lodge. They base their dues on the minimum wage. So whatever the minimum wage is, I believe it's 10 times the minimum wage is the dues. Right? Makes sense. I mean, if the minimum wage is $16.50, I don't know what it is. I'm sorry, I don't. If it's 10 times that, then guess what? $165 is your dues.
I mean, a child who works for minimum wage, it just went up to $13.69 an hour.
$13.69. Okay, so multiply that by 10. That should be your dues. Now, if you have a Grand Lodge assessment like we do, you add the assessment on top of that, and this is and these are your dues. Now, my lodge, we can keep our dues artificially low because of our crab feed. But if we didn't have a crab feed, we would have a serious discussion about, okay, this is what it costs to do what we want to do. And then I would have every expectation that we would raise the dues accordingly to meet that expectation. You just can't be, the money that we bring in cannot be sacrosanct. It cannot. We cannot say this is ours. We're never going to give it away. We're always going to hold it. We're always okay and again, my question is, for what reason? Why are we so hung up on like, what is it I heard? We have 2 toilets in the bathroom. One's down. We can use the other. I don't get that. I don't understand that point. I think I told the story in the presentation originally that of the individual who turned down a scholarship because they drove by one of our buildings and thought there is no way this organization can give me that kind of money. That's sad.
But that's reading a book from the cover too. Like, they're making a lot of assumptions too, right? It is really sad though that's someone's impression.
Well, again, remember I said your building screams Freemasonry 24/7, right? What is it saying about your lodge? What is it saying about the fraternity as a whole?
Yeah, and our paint was peeling off, and it was looking pretty tattered, right? And the 45-minute discussion that ensued when they said, "Hey, let's paint the building," And that was after. That was at the annual general meeting of the holding society, and so that was after all the side talk had already been done, right? You know, a 45-minute discussion about, should we do it, and then how much should we spend on it? Well, it's funny when what they decide to pick apart, right?
Here's the interesting thing that gets lost when you have those kinds of discussions. I'm gonna make a guess here. The five of us here did not join Freemasonry to talk about toilet repair.
No,
We didn't join Freemasonry to talk about paint color.
no.
We joined Freemasonry because we viewed it as a transformative organization, right? And when you put frugality in the way, and remember the term frugality without discretion in the way, and your meetings and your interactions with your brethren are surrounded by how am I going to save $1? Can you bring ketchup to the meeting, to the event, instead of us having to buy ketchup? Okay. When your discussions in lodge or at the building are focused on that, then the purpose for you joining Freemasonry gets lost, does it not? And when it gets lost, you know what else gets lost? The people who joined. Because they're going, that's not why I joined. I mean, I've got no problem getting on a riding mower and mowing the lawn if that's what they need me to do, if that's what they need me to do 1 month. But I still want to talk about the other stuff. I want to know about the history. I want to know why Freemason, why 14 men, 14 of our U.S. presidents are Masons. I want to know what that's all about. You know, I want to know why. I want to know, they want to know about that kind of stuff. They, they get that other thing is nice to talk about. But when it becomes the basis of lodge meetings, when it becomes the basis of your festive board discussions, guess what? You've lost me completely. You have completely lost me.
We did do a show several months ago dedicated to dues in our areas, our districts, and our regions. And it was pretty shocking to do that research. And I think on that show, and I'm often heard to say that, when I joined Masonry, I just assumed that there was some large, cost to join. And I wasn't seriously looking at it. I'm not well off necessarily, but I was looking into golf memberships, trying to, seeing what's out there. And I was passionate about golf many years ago. And it's very expensive to join a club. And so when I was talking with now my mentor, then I didn't know who he was, most worshipful Al Jorgensen, just out down the street. And he was talking, he came to the part where he said, there is a cost to Masonry. And I thought, oh, here it is. I have to save up for 6 months or a year, or whatever, and get ready for it. And he said, it's $60. And I thought I misheard him. I said, you mean $60 a month? And he goes, no, $60 a year. I said, oh, my Lions Club dues are $85. And so I was baffled that it was so inexpensive to join. And I've recently I created a new drum that I'm beating around dues, and it started as part of that show. I think dues should be somewhere in $1,000 to $1,200 range per year, but that would include multiple elements of excellent discretion, a nice catered dinner at your meetings, if that's what a lodge wants to do, a ticket to a high quality annual education event, $100 or whatever the lodge should decide. A portion of that should go to the Grand Lodge, a designated charity, a Grand Lodge charity. Another $100 could go to a lodge charity. So you could budget in those items or divvy up those monies, but I think it should be substantial. And when a man comes to, especially a young man, when he comes to our lodge and he wants to join, we tell him that the dues, it costs $175 to join, and then now it's $125 a year. And if he has to think about that and kind of scrape or pull, think about can he afford that? I'm often wondering unfortunately, silently, is this the right avenue for him? Because you're right. While there's only one capital letter in Freemasonry, there's just the F, not the whole word free. There are opportunities to give, whether it be a charity or other event, or what I really like about doing charities and lodges, the pass the hat idea, where, and especially if a guy knows that could be coming, if he's prepared to give. Now, if he's spent his last $20 on dinner and now he doesn't have any money with him, the lodge has to have that mentality, has to have that idea that, hey, in our meetings, this is where we can have a pass the hat. People will come prepared if they know they have to be prepared. But the idea of he might need more money besides the $100 a year or $60 a year or whatever. I mean, there was one lodge in our district, and I won't name them specifically. The annual dues by Grand Lodge are more than the dues the lodge pays each member, than the member pays. So they're going backwards $10 or $20 a year because the lodge pays for the membership, for the annual assessment. And by the way, they do, after their degree, their dinners at the degrees are like soup. I think they open a can of soup and heat it up, in a loaf of bread. And so it's that unfortunate mentality of how can we get away with that without having to be. Now, if you had a really nice meal, guys would come, they would be participant. They would want to be there, and they would really enjoy themselves. So again, I think if we could figure out $1,000 or $1,200 a year for some kind of dues, that would be my ticket.
As always, I want to put a historical twist on this. In our jurisdiction in 1871, our first constitution said that the lodge had to charge a minimum of $50 for initiation, which would be roughly $1,100 today. Right in the zone. The average lodge, and they charged it quarterly, so I'm not entirely sure how they gave out dues cards, was $12, which would be about $300 and a quarter today. My lodge at the moment charges $275, and we're still running a deficit, but we've got a pillow, which I don't think we should be using, but that's our annual discussion. But those are the real numbers. 10 years ago, this jurisdiction charged $300, the minimum was $300 for initiation. Over the last 10 years, we've constitutionally raised it to $500. You get the older members saying, oh, we won't get anyone. We get the younger petitioners saying, oh, I got that in my pocket. So, yeah, time for a change.
And an interesting thing, because I talked to all the candidates coming in, they're always surprised. It doesn't matter their age. They're always surprised that initiation's only $450, right?
It'd be $500 now.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it'd be $500 now, but and that our dues, I mean, our lodge is $175, and they're quite surprised. Because like you say, like David said, $2,500 is a cheap golf membership somewhere. I mean, some of these clubs in Kelowna are $5,000, right? And that's just to belong, right?
And if you have to save up for a couple of months before you can join the lodge, that's a good thing.
Right. It adds that value, that perceived value too, right? So.
Because it was $300 when I joined 40 years ago.
Well, David, you bring up the number, and that's kind of the English model. You're going to pay this much for your annual dues. We give you this as part of it. Now, if you miss the dinner in March, sorry, we're not going to give you a refund. That sort of thing. And it's all that line. If you've paid in advance, you're going to go. Like, for example, I have season tickets to two playhouses in Seattle. I don't miss because I bought the ticket. I bought in advance. I'm going to the show. That's kind of how that works. So if I paid that, guess what? I'm not going to miss it. I'm going.
And you want it to be the most excellent show or excellent event you've ever been to. So that harkens back. Thank you, Matt, for the point. Harkens back to the point that the quantity without quality, and Steve just alluded to it as well. They're expecting the quality. They're expecting something, and so if the lodge isn't providing that expectation, then you're in as much trouble as if it doesn't matter if you charge $1,000 or $100. If you charge $1,000 though, it better be good.
Yeah, and again, you just don't throw it out there. You've got there's got to be a reason why again, remember, it's frugality without discretion. So guess what? Now you have to have that level of discretion that you're putting out there. We're going to charge this much. This is what you're getting in return. This is the payoff. You don't say it that way, obviously, but they see that, okay, I'm going to go to the Frankenstein crab feed. I'm going to get great crab. I'm going to get a nice drink, or drinks, as the case may be. There's great auction items that I'm willing to support, and I'll look at the charity where the money's going to. All of that, for this, I'm in, and I'm in hard, and that's the great thing, you can have an event as cheap or as expensive as it is, as you want it to be, but if it's a terrible event, then one of two things is going to happen. Well, at least it wasn't a whole lot of money, or gee, that was next, or it's a waste of money. And if it's a bigger ticket, boy, that was a real waste of money, that sort of thing.
And don't forget, we should Masonic education in there, quality Masonic education in.
Right.
And I actually bring up a good point there. I was at a lodge and they were talking, and they had a speaker's budget. They're talking about, and it was like $2,000 speaker budget, right? And one guy stood up and said, when I was master, I had speakers. I didn't charge any. I didn't have that speaker line in my budget. I could call anybody to be a speaker. The response was, yes, but we're bringing in people from throughout the United States and British Columbia who are experts in this particular topic or that particular topic to come in and share with us. Speakers that have reputations, that sort of thing. As Trevor will back up on this one, there's a mass of Masonic writings out there, right? But guess what? There's diamonds and there's sands, and you can get the sands for free. But wouldn't it be better to pay a little bit for the diamonds? That's what that lodge did. And as a result, guess what? Every quarter they had a high-end Masonic speaker, and it was fantastic. So, that again, that goes back to that. Yeah, you can get whoever you want for nothing. Shoot, you guys get me for nothing. But
I was about to ask how many of those high-quality speakers were named Jim Mendoza. But so we've talked a fair amount about the blunder, the error that people commit. I guess I wanted to make sure that we address overcoming that. We sort of glanced off of a couple ideas, but does anybody have a plan, a thought as to how to combat that beyond, just spend more money? What's the...
So our jurisdiction, British Columbia, and this is fairly unofficial and has just simply been the policy of the Grand Secretary's office over the last 10 years or so, is promoting lodges to do an annual budget. So sure, you may spend an hour or more discussing it in one meeting, but at least you're not discussing passing accounts in 10 meetings. So that brings it down and also focuses on what the real costs are. I think part of the problem is going to solve itself with a younger membership who want to spend the money, who are prepared to pony up for it. Beyond that, I'm not sure what else we can actively do.
Well, the other half of this is you deliver on the other side.
Yes.
Okay. So basically, if you say, I'm going to go back to speakers, we're going to spend $2,000 for Masonic speakers. We're going to deliver on the other side. So we're going to bring in people. So we're going to have I'm going to use what's happened down here in the lower 48. We're going to have the Brett Morrises and the Art de Hoyases, speak. We're going to have, we're going to have in the West Coast, we're going to have guys like John Cooper come up and talk. We're going to have, past Grandmaster from Texas, Boyd Patterson, come up. We're going to bring in Owen Shea from Hawaii, that sort of thing. We're going to bring in, and they will deliver, because they have a reputation for delivery and they can do a great job. But again, yeah, you have to have the budget, and then you have to justify the budget, and then you have to deliver. If you don't, that's the only way you overcome that. And then, of course, we just have to get out of the mindset. We have to use some common sense, such as, yes, we're going to have a sweethearts dinner, but no, the ladies are not going to cook it. Okay. I will keep coming back to that because that it makes me laugh and it makes me angry at the same time.
The other thing is we have to do this repeatedly, because if you just hold one event, those people who have had a bad experience in the past aren't going to come out to that and may not hear about how wonderful it was. It takes several good events over several years to bring back people whose wives have said, I'm never going to another one of those events again. Oh, well, now we have a track record of improvement, so they'll start coming back. But you can't do it once and expect everything to change. It's got to be over a period of time.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that's one of the things that we've realized. Like we've been doing the table lodge, and it's becoming a sold out event a year in advance. Well, it was going to be this year, but we all know what happened there. But and part of our efforts to improve our Masonic experience put us into these discussions about doing it right. Do we have the wives, or do we do it ourselves? Do we hire a caterer? Is it plated? Is it buffet? What quality of an event do we want? And I think that the lodges that want to will, the ones that want to will. The membership in our lodge, there's enough members in our lodge that are wanting that some way we're going to figure out how to do it. We can't put that financial strain onto the members that don't live in town, for example, but keep their membership, because they're not going to be able to participate in those things. Or those that are elderly and can't come out to our meetings anymore, but continue to keep their memberships active, right? So we're going to find a way, and I just hope that in the lodges that are looking for that, I hope there's enough youth in them to bring it forward and keep it going.
One final thought, because I know we're running out of time. You mentioned the brethren who don't live where the lodge meets anymore. If part of what you're doing as part of the Masonic experience is continue communicating with those brethren, when you send dues notices out, it's nothing wrong with saying, by the way, we're doing this. If you'd like to help contribute to it, that would be appreciated. If you're delivering quality, even the brethren outside of where you call home, some of them will still cut you a check because they see that you're creating a quality experience and they want to be part of that quality experience, even if it only means that they're writing a check to help that quality experience happen. Okay. But it all starts with, like I said, all of us committing to saying, we're going to do good. We're going to do right by our members. And we're not just going to do it because we're not going to do it cheaply because we can. We're going to do it right. It doesn't have to be expensive. I didn't say expensive at all. But you can't take it that way. You can't have what I will call a paper plate plastic fork event and say, look at this quality event that we're doing. Okay. From a building standpoint, you can't have peeling walls and say, this is my home. That sort of thing. Or you can't bring somebody who doesn't know about a topic and say, isn't that a great expert?
And on that note, we hope we've given you some of the working tools to overcome the 7 blunders of Freemasonry. See what I did there? I worked the title in. And so on behalf of Right Worship Brother Trevor and Worship Brother Stephen and David and myself, thank you, Most Worship Brother Jim, for being here for another episode. And we look forward to talking to you all again on the next episode of the Working Tools Podcast. Goodbye.